The last time Manchester United and Tottenham faced off in a European final, it was United who walked off the pitch in tears. They just lost the Europa League final, and everyone thought that kind of heartbreak would spark a change, a wake-up call to finally get things right. But fast forward to this season and the reality is shocking. Tottenham, the supposed underdogs, look miles ahead. And it all comes down to one thing: the manager. Well, let's talk about it. When the season started, everyone had high expectations for Amorim's Manchester United. The belief was simple. After last year's failures, this was the moment the team would finally click. The squad had been reinforced, pre-season looked sharp, and fans genuinely felt that United were about to perform at a level we hadn't seen in years. The very first game of the season seemed to confirm that. It was against Arsenal, a tough test right from the start, and United actually played some really good football. They pressed well, moved the ball quickly, and created chances that made you think, okay, something's different here. Yes, they lost the game, but the performance gave supporters belief. For once, it felt like United had a clear structure and identity under Amorim. But that belief didn't last long. From the very next game, cracks started to appear. The 1-1 draw with Fulham summed up everything. It was half good, half bad. There were flashes of quality, but also long stretches where United looked lost and short of ideas. The big criticism that came out of that match was obvious: they just couldn't score goals easily. For a club like Manchester United, that's a serious problem. And this is where the warning signs began to show. The false hope from the Arsenal game was starting to fade. Fans who thought the team had turned a corner were suddenly reminded of the same old issues. If the Fulham game showed cracks, then the Grimsby Town match tore everything apart. Think about it. Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs in world football, facing Grimsby, aside from League One. On paper, this should have been straightforward, a chance to dominate, score goals, and build confidence. But what happened was the exact opposite. Grimsby stunned everyone by scoring the first 2 goals. For long stretches, United looked powerless. They were chasing shadows, struggling to create clear chances, and playing without urgency. Only later in the game did United finally react, pulling 2 goals back to make it 2-2 and force penalties. Then came the shootout, and just like that, United were out, losing to Grimsby on penalties. It wasn't just the defeat, it was the manner of it. United didn't look ruthless, they didn't look composed, and they certainly didn't look like a team that could be trusted in big moments. That night felt like rock bottom, but what followed revealed a pattern that has defined Amorim's time at the club, a pattern that explains why United have struggled to take the next step forward. After the disaster against Grimsby, United bounced back with a win over Burnley. But this has become Amorim's trademark. He almost always beats promoted teams. The issue is what happens outside of those games. Since last season, he's managed only 4 wins against non-promoted sides, which is nowhere near good enough for Manchester United. Beating teams like Burnley should be the baseline, not the highlight. And the very next game showed the real gap, because when Pep Guardiola's Manchester City came around, they completely exposed Amorim's system. The Burnley win might have given Amorim some breathing space, but the real test was always going to be Manchester City. And when that game came, Pep Guardiola completely exposed the flaws in United's setup. Early on, there were moments where United looked like they could hurt City. With Bayanda in goal, they avoided short passes and often went long to Chesko, which made sense. At times, when they managed to push Fernandes higher into the half spaces, it looked like they could overload Rodri and create problems. But those moments were rare, and they happened far too deep in their own half to really threaten City. The bigger issue was the midfield. United built up with their usual back 3 and double pivot, but City's man-to-man press cut off the centre completely. Whenever United tried to play through the middle, Foden and Reinders stepped in to block passing lanes. That left United with one escape route. The flanks, switching play occasionally gave them space, especially on the right, where Mazraoui and Mbemo tried to combine. but Pep quickly adapted. This is where the difference between the two managers showed. Amorim stuck with his 3-4-3, while Pep tweaked his shape mid-game. City shifted to a dynamic 4-4-2 out of possession, with Foden stepping up alongside Haaland. That small adjustment put United's backline under constant pressure and killed their rhythm. On the ball, Pep's changes were even more decisive. By pushing O'Reilly and Doku into central zones, City overloaded United's midfield. Suddenly, Doku wasn't just wide, he was driving through the middle, pulling defenders out of position and creating the space Haaland thrived in. That's exactly how City broke through. Once the first goal went in, the game tilted completely in their favour, and by the end, the scoreline reflected total dominance. This match made something very clear. Amorim's rigid system couldn't adapt when faced with Guardiola's flexibility, and it highlighted the bigger question: is Amorim too stubborn with his 3-4-3? And is that what's holding Manchester United back? Because if you look across England, there's another manager who once built his reputation on the 3-4-3, but unlike Amorim, he knew when to let it go, and that man is Thomas Frank. The loss to City showed exactly where Amorim's biggest weakness lies: his refusal to move away from the 3-4-3. For him, this system is everything, and to be fair, you can understand why. At Sporting, it was the formation that defined his success. He used it to break a 20-year curse, deliver the league title, and re-establish Sporting as a real force in Portugal. That's no small achievement, and it explains why he sees the 3-4-3 as his crown jewel. But the problem is simple: not every squad is built to play that way. At Manchester United, the pieces don't fit. Bruno Fernandes, one of the best number 10s in the world, is stuck deeper as an 8, which takes away his creativity. The wingbacks end up being the biggest attacking outlets, even though players like Dorgu aren't natural finishers, and instead of the formation lifting the team, it restricts them. This is the danger of being stubborn as a manager. A system that worked in one environment won't automatically work in another. And this is where the contrast with Thomas Frank becomes important. He also made his name using a 3-4-3. But when he stepped into Tottenham, he immediately realized his players couldn't function in that setup. And unlike Amorim, Frank didn't cling to the past, he adapted. This is where the contrast between Amorim and Thomas Frank becomes clear. Frank walked into Tottenham with a reputation for the 3-4-3, the same system Amorim refuses to abandon. But instead of clinging to it, he took one look at his squad and adapted. In just a handful of matches, he's already shown Spurs can play in completely different ways depending on the opponent. Against PSG, Frank set up in a 3-5-2. It was compact, disciplined, and built on defensive solidity. The wingbacks handled PSG's width, while Kudus and Richarlison worked the counterattacks with telepathic understanding. It wasn't flashy, but it was effective, and Spurs grabbed both goals from set pieces. It was pragmatic football, exactly what was needed in that moment. Then came the Premier League opener against Burnley, and Frank switched again, this time to a 4-2-3-1. The style flipped completely. Spurs dominated possession, jumping from 30% in Paris to 67% at Turf Moor. Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall replaced the more physical Pelinha and Bentancur, giving Spurs the technical control to move the ball with precision. Kudus shifted wide, Richarlison stayed central, and suddenly Spurs looked like a side that could unlock low blocks with clever passing and movement. And when Manchester City came around, Frank produced a hybrid of the two approaches. Spurs pressed high with a bold man-to-man system, refusing to let City settle. Pelinha and Sarr bossed the midfield, while Spurs mixed short build-up with direct long balls to keep Guardiola guessing. The result? A 2-0 win at the Etihad, one of the most convincing statements any manager has made this season. That is what adaptability looks like. One manager, 3 different matches, 3 completely different setups. What makes Frank's Tottenham so dangerous isn't just the results, it's the fact you never know what you're going to get. Against PSG, they absorbed pressure and countered. Against Burnley, they dominated the ball. Against City, they pressed high and forced mistakes. Every game asked something different from his players, and every game they delivered. Compare that to Amorim's Manchester United. The same 3-4-3 every week, no matter the opponent, no matter the players. Bruno Fernandes wasted in deeper areas, attackers starved of creativity, and wingbacks asked to do jobs they're not built for. The difference couldn't be clearer. Frank adapts to his team and his opponent. Amorim forces his team into a structure even when it doesn't fit. And the results speak for themselves. Spurs have scored freely, defended solidly, and taken down some of the biggest names in Europe already. United, meanwhile, looks predictable, rigid, and easy to plan against. The lesson here for Amorim is obvious. Flexibility isn't weakness, it's what allows a manager to get the best out of his squad. And that's exactly what Manchester United need if they're going to compete at the very top again. Because the truth is, the problem isn't just about results, it's about the system holding players back. The biggest problem with Amorim's Manchester United isn't just the result, it's how his system holds back the very players who should be carrying the team. The 3-4-3 was perfect at Sporting because the squad was tailored for it. At United, it's the opposite. The formation clashes with the strength of the players. Take Bruno Fernandes. He's one of the best natural number 10s in Europe, a player who thrives in pockets of space behind the striker, where he can create and dictate. But in Amorim's setup, he's pushed deeper as part of a double pivot or as a makeshift 8. That role limits his creativity, and it takes away what makes him special. Then there's Mainu. As a young midfielder, he has the intelligence and ability to thrive in a three-man midfield, where he can both cover defensively and drive the ball forward. But in a two-man pivot, he's forced into constant firefighting, with no chance to show the full range of his game. Even in attack, the system doesn't maximize talent. Dorgu ends up as the main outlet, constantly pushed high like a winger, but he doesn't have the instincts to finish moves consistently. Instead of the ball finding United's most dangerous forwards in good positions, it funnels into areas where the chances often break down. This is the price of Amorim's stubbornness. By forcing the squad into a rigid shape, he's reduced their output and he's made the team predictable. A simple switch to a 4-3-3 could solve so many of these problems. It would put Bruno back in his natural role, allow Mainu to grow into a proper midfield engine, and give United's attackers more freedom to operate where they're most dangerous. That's why Thomas Frank's approach feels like such a blueprint. He didn't force Maddison or Xavi Simons into uncomfortable roles. He built a structure around them, and that's exactly what Amorim needs to learn if United are going to take the next step. Because, right now, it isn't just about tactics on paper, it's about getting the best out of the individuals who can win you games. And unless Amorim realizes that, United will continue to fall behind. But what do you think? Should Amorim change his system like Thomas Frank, or should he continue with his usual style? Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.